2025 was a great year for Evercade. You never really know what you're going to get in this ecosystem, but here are the things I personally would like to see in 2026. Keep in mind, these are not predictions. I have no idea what Blaze is going to do, and I won't even attempt to guess. These are just the things I would like to see, so let me know what you would like to see down in the comments, subscribe, hit that like button, and let's get into it. I talked last month about how much I love the fact that we got the title collections on cart, and that is awesome. It also makes me think of the one other company which is currently only locked to hardware, and that is Capcom. There are a few things that would excite me and probably the whole community more than Capcom cards. The possibilities are quite literally endless. Just think of all the amazing properties that Capcom brings to the table, and imagine how you can figure those into a million different incredible collections that range from purple arcade cards to red cards that cover everything from the original Nintendo to PlayStation, and I personally would love to see more red cards than purple. Just think of what we can get. Imagine stuff like Mega Man Legends and Misadventures of Tron Bone on a cartridge, a Breath of Fire collection, the original Resident Evil trilogy, awesome SNES stuff like the Final Fight trilogy, Demon's Crest, Mega Man, Street Fighter, hidden gems like Little Nemo, iconic franchises like Bionic Commando. I could probably do a whole series of videos on the incredible amount of things that Capcom could bring to the Evercade ecosystem. Blaze has already established at least some relation with them. Hopefully, now they have gotten bigger and secured stuff like Rare and SNK, Capcom will finally be willing to put their stuff on cartridges in this ecosystem. As far as companies go that do not currently have any relationship with Blaze, my pick would be Sega. Like Capcom, you could create a million different awesome collections of both red and purple cards with a Sega license, and this is a company that seems to license their games out to everything, and they've been doing it forever. We have Sega collections dating as far back as the PlayStation 2, so what's the holdup? Let's get these guys on Evercade. The number of incredible properties that Sega owns is virtually unmatched. On the console side, just think of what they can potentially bring to the table. Shinobi, Sonic, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, and Phantasy Star, just to name a few. Any one of those would make for an incredible collection, but put a few of those franchises in a cart, and you have something that just about everyone who owns an Evercade will purchase. Of course, Sega is also famous for having an incredible arcade presence, so just think of the awesomeness that they could fill a purple cartridge with. They have been a force in the arcade scene for basically my whole life. Imagining stuff like the early Virtua Fighters and Afterburn on an arcade cartridge, that would be pretty cool. And what about the Saturn? I know the Saturn is notoriously difficult to emulate, but the Evercade has done both PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64, so the processing power might be there. I would just love to see some of the Saturn greats on the system. Sega is just a powerhouse. They have never been shy about licensing their games, so none of anything on this list is a prediction. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if I was to guess the thing that is most likely to happen from this wish list, it would be a Sega collection, and I actually can't think of a collection of Sega games that I wouldn't want to buy. So let's talk about some of the stuff that already exists. Let's start with the obvious. We know for a fact we are getting more Neo Geo this year. They said that when they made the initial announcement. I don't think I'd be disappointed if we just got Neo Geo cards for the rest of the year. The amount of awesome games in that system is countless. I think it goes without saying that no matter what cartridge we get, there will be one more Metal Slug on each. I wonder if that means we're going to get 3 more. Having 6 cards means that we get all 6 mainline Metal Slug games on the Evercade. I would also love to see Cross Swords 2, almost more than any other game. This was a Neo Geo CD exclusive, not the first one that we'll be getting on the Evercade, and it is a game that I've always wanted to play and just can't seem to find a good way to emulate it. I love the original Cross Swords and have been wanting to play this game for decades, so that's the thing I'll be crossing my fingers for the most. Sengoku 3 needs to get on one of these cards. Right now it is tied down to the Super Pocket, so it is plausible we see it, and I think it would be a fantastic pick, especially since the other two are already on cartridge. You know we're getting some fighting games. At least one more King of Fighters is inevitable, and 98 seems to be an obvious pick, as that is a legendary game. I'd love to see the Real Bout Fatal Furies on here as well. Those were absolutely epics, one of my favorite SNK fighting games ever, and we already have Mark of the Wolf, so it almost seems like a no-brainer. On a personal note, more than any other game, I want to see World Heroes 2. It is one of my all-time favorite fighting games, and even though I already own it physically through the PlayStation 2 World Heroes anthology, I would love it on Evercade where I could take it with me everywhere I go. If you're a Switch collector like I am, you know there are currently 10 volumes of Neo Geo games that have a physical release on that system. So really, we have a long way to go, and it would be hard to find a collection of games that I would not be excited about. But can we talk about SNK Red cartridge for a second? The early SNK stuff and some of the NES stuff. How about some Neo Geo Pocket games? Maybe even a translated version of the Samurai Showdown RPG. I know this is usually not what people think about when they think of SNK, but there are some cool possibilities that I wouldn't mind seeing explored, but I guess if they just gave me more Neo Geo purple cards, I'd be happy with that too. And while we're talking about random things that we like to see on Evercade, I want to give a shout out to the old Laserdisc games. I don't know how much of a demand for this stuff there is, but this is just my personal list, and I used to love these games. Dragon's Lair Trilogy is kind of an obvious pick here. We have seen this package released on a couple of consoles, and typically consists of the first 2 Dragon's Lair games along with Space Ace. I do have a physical version of that on the Wii, but I just think it would be a great fit for this console. Alternatively, it would be pretty cool to see some of that old Sega CD stuff. You know, games like Time Gal, Road Avenger, and Revenge of the Ninja. I think there was a physical release of that kind of collection on the Switch recently, and it'd be cool to see that on the Evercade. It probably wouldn't sell too well, so it's not something I would expect. It's just a weird personal preference of mine. While my thoughts on Laserdisc games are probably going to be pretty unpopular, I think everyone's going to agree with the next thing I would love to see more of. Let's start getting an RPG or tactical RPG presence on the system. Now personally, I would love more than anything for us to start seeing a bunch of strategy RPGs on the Evercade. As a Switch physical collector, the #1 genre I collect are tactical RPGs. They're such a good fit for a console like the Switch, which has built-in portability, but also allows me to easily play on my TV. The Evercade feels very similar in that regard. These kinds of games would be perfect for the system, and I know there's a demand for them. Just think of the possibilities. The PS1 was a haven for this kind of game. Everything from Vagrant Story to Final Fantasy Tactics would just be amazing to have. The list is way too long to even start to break into, but if you start to think of publishers like Square and Work Designs, there is a lot of fodder there. But we don't have to limit ourselves to the PS1. There are a ton of great games on 16-bit consoles, but particularly the Game Boy Advance. The system was a treasure trove of awesome RPGs and strategy games, with amazing titles like Final Fantasy Advance, Onimusha Tactics, and Tactics Ogre Knights of the Lotus, just to name a few. One thing is for sure, there's a ton of potential here. I also think there's a pretty big demand for it, so hopefully Blaze has something in the works. And how about some blue cards? I think the community can be pretty negative about these, but I personally love that they exist, and I think we need more of them. Last year we barely saw them, and I think there are so many cool opportunities. I never really grew up playing computer games, so there's a whole era of games I missed out on. And I've been enjoying playing through some of these blue cards, experiencing them for the first time. They're not all winners, but there's some fun to be had here, and the discovery factor is through the roof for me. I would love to see another C64 collection or two, and there's a whole universe of DOS games that I've heard about but never got to experience. Stuff like Jazz Jackrabbit and Commander Keen are the 2 big ones that I've heard but never actually got to play. I also know virtually nothing about the Amiga, but the Team 17 collection was solid, and I would love to see more like that. And of course, we can't leave out Home Computer Heroes. I would say that the collection stands next to Growcraft as the best blue cart we have, with the one thing they have in common being they are both new computer games developed by small independent developers. I can't believe we have not gotten a Home Computer Heroes 2 yet, but that needs to happen. Or how about a dual cart of indie PC games? I don't even know what exists in that sphere, but I'm sure there are some cool things out there. No matter which way you slice it, there's a ton of potential for more blue carts, and I'm really hoping some of that is realized this year. The last item on this wish list, and also the one I want to see the most, is more indie games. Last year my biggest complaint was the lack of these, and it's probably not a super popular opinion, but I'll be okay if Evercade almost exclusively just published indies. While I'm sure most people would prefer a mix of retro and indies, I think most in the Evercade community would agree that the indie releases have been some of the best on the system. But I'm guessing they're not too difficult to license. A big focus of my channel is looking at totally obscure games that nobody's ever heard of. Even if I've never played another new game in my life, I can keep this channel going for years just based on the hundreds of incredible indie games that I've played that are just living in the obscurity of the Steam store. Many of these games offer retro-themed experiences with modern conveniences. I feel like these kinds of games are a natural fit for the Evercade ecosystem and play well to the average Evercade user. I feel like many of these games are completely obscure. The developers probably made virtually no, if any, money off of them and would love the chance to give the game more exposure and a physical release. I'm really hoping they do not abandon indie heroes. We need a 5th collection of them, and I almost think Blaze would do well to rebrand the series and maybe call it Homebrew Heroes. There are still tons of new games being developed for old systems, and we've seen a lot of these on the Indie Hero collections, but there are countless more that are simply incredible. My guess is if you're developing a game for the NES, you probably would love to see it on a physical cartridge, so it's an easy market for Blaze to tap into. No matter which way they go about it, there is definitely potential here that Blaze has not realized, and getting more indies onto their system would be awesome, and I know I'm not the only one who feels that way. I bet a majority of us feel the same way and would love to see a greater indie presence on the system. And finally, we gotta talk about hardware. I feel like the community gives Blaze some flack for re-releasing the hardware at cheaper prices and sometimes are bored by hardware releases, and I get it. I have my EXP, I have my VS, and I'm not really interested in getting any new hardware, but we'll probably see some this year. My guess is we'll see a few new alphas. I think a Neo Geo alpha would be really cool. I personally would like an alpha. They're a little too expensive for me, but they look great, and if I was going to get one, the Neo Geo would probably be it. I'm sure we'll see some Super Pockets, and I can't even guess which ones, what they could put out. There's a lot of cool choices. There's been some talk of an Evercade 2. I will say personally, I'm not interested in Evercade 2. I think Evercade is really great at what it does. It's there for indies and retro games, and I think there's so much there, and Evercade 2 could potentially muddy the waters. However, if they're going to do an Evercade 2, I think number one, it needs to be backwards compatible, and also I would kind of want it to be somewhat compatible with whatever current operating systems there are. I just talked about how great it would be to see more indies on the system. So if an Evercade 2 can make it easier for indie developers to port their games onto the Evercade, that might be a big win. And maybe even Blaze would consider, leasing out their technology so people could publish their own games, or even go through a different company like a limited run or something like that to give us even more cartridges per year. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds in regards to that. I'm pretty happy with the ecosystem as it is, but people talk about it. That's just my thoughts on it. So having said all that, thanks for watching, and let me know what you want from Evercade in 2026.